Hello friends, this is Tisha from Meadows and Mortar by Tisha. I am here to show you how to take this big huge plastic egg into something super cute for spring. So the first thing that you want to do is get this big old plastic egg that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I think that it was $3 for this thing. And you're going to put it together and then you're just going to glue it down with hot glue right at the seam of it. Now I actually tried to hot glue the inside, but then I couldn't get it to pop together because I guess that it was just too bulky. So I popped it in together and then I put a bead of hot glue all around the outside of it. Then I take some Sure Prep bonding primer, and this is from Paint Couture Paint, and then I just put it all over the little egg. Now you could use a paintbrush to put this on. I just had a makeup sponge that I used to kind of dab it on there. I would rub and then dab and then rub and then dab. There was no reason that I did this other than it was handy and I didn't want to wash a paintbrush afterwards, so that's what I did here. By using a bonding primer, this is going to make sure that your paint will stick to this. Now this is a very shiny surface, this is a plastic egg, and that paint would not stick on there had I not used a bonding primer first. So I'm going to take some molds and I'm just going to dust them with cornstarch. Actually, that's a lie. I didn't use cornstarch. I used baking powder because I didn't have any cornstarch. But cornstarch works much better. So anyways, you're just going to dust the inside of your mold with that. And then you're going to take some air dry clay. I'm using DAS air dry clay. That's D-A-S. You can get that from pretty much any little store. I think Walmart has them. I got this from Hobby Lobby. You can order it off Amazon. You just want to make sure that you press it into your mold really well, and then you just take the excess off of the back of it. I just use that little palette knife or whatever those are called. I don't know, the little spatula thingy, and you just scrape the excess off. You can use your fingers to kind of just pull it off of there too, and that works just fine. Then what I like to do is I like to flip my mold over and then kind of let gravity help me work the mold out. And as you can see, part of my little mold there broke off, but that's okay. I can just pick it back up and then I can glue it back on. The great thing about using clay in your molds is that it makes it sort of like this old world texture, and it's not going to be perfect. So if you have imperfections, it's okay. It's just going to add to the charm. Now I'm taking a variety of different pieces of molds and I'm just using my Titebond Quick and Thick to adhere it on there. So what I'm wanting to do to start off here is I'm mainly wanting to cover up that seam. And then once that I have the seam covered up, then I can just take more molds and then I can just build one on top of the other to be able to make the right kind of construction in the design that I'm wanting. And then I take Paint Couture's Embossing Medium and I just take a natural bristle brush and I'm just dipping it right in the product and then I'm stippling it onto my egg. Now what this is going to do is this is going to make a textured base on here for me to be able to paint over top of. If you're not familiar with me, you will learn quickly if you keep following me that I love textured pieces. I don't know why, but I feel like they just speak to me, they make me happy. I really enjoy doing it. If you have stuck with me this long, thank you so much. And I just ask that you will like, comment, and subscribe as my YouTube channel tries to grow. That would help me greatly. Now the cool thing about whenever you're putting texture on something is that it doesn't have to be perfect. So you get to choose how much or how little texture that you want. You also get to choose the design that you're wanting to put in your texture. If you want swirls, you can drag that paintbrush around. If you're just wanting peaks and valleys, then you can stipple it on. Now this next kind of texture is called Paint Couture Crust. This stuff is awesome. It's sort of like the embossing medium with sand mixed into it. I'm not exactly sure what it's made out of, but I do know that it's really cool. And just if you're a tactile person, this is a really cool variation of texture. So you can use a paintbrush to put this on, but you can see I just use a gloved hand and I just stuck it right down inside of the crust, and then I take it and I'm sort of concentrating it around the molds and then I'm sort of scraping it up. So it's thicker around the edges of the molding, and then as I bring it up, it's going to thin out. And that sort of reminds me of like old plaster that's trying to wear down and break off. You know how it's sort of like thicker at the base, and then as it gets more crumbly towards the top, it sort of disintegrates a little bit. So that's sort of what I was trying to go for here. I wanted a little hint of some more textured, but I wanted it to be a little more controlled. So I just took this stencil and I used some of the Embossing Medium, and I just took that little palette knife and I just scraped it over top. Now this, I did not want to be perfect. I wanted it to be sort of controlled, but I didn't want it to be all matchy. So I wanted to like hit spots and miss spots so that it looked sort of like a Venetian plaster that is broken and crackled. Now I've broken out some of Paint Couture's chalk style paint, and this one is in the color Buttercream. Now this Buttercream is exactly like it sounds. It looks just like buttercream icing, but I probably wouldn't try to lick it if I were you. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to cover up the whole egg. Now it's okay if I miss a few spots, because remember, this is going to be something that's going to be textured and it's going to be weathered looking, so it doesn't have to be 100% smooth coverage. But I do want to get as much coverage as I can, because this is going to be my base coat. This is going to be what I'm layering everything else on. So you want to make sure that you get a pretty good base coat using that Buttercream, and then you're going to come in with Paint Couture's Driftwood. Now when you're using the Driftwood here, you're just wanting this to be a watered down version. So you can either take your paintbrush and dip it in water and put it on there, or you could do like me and use your mister bottle. So I just took my mister bottle and I sprayed the water all over the egg, and then I take some of the Driftwood on my paintbrush, and then I'm just sort of skimming the top of it. Now I'm going to make sure that I cover the whole egg with this, but where I'm just skimming the top of it, it's going to make it look like it's a little more worn. So I want the depth and the color that the Driftwood brings, but I also want to be able to see that buttercream through it. So you'll see right here, whenever I'm concentrating around those molds, I'm putting the Driftwood on there, and then I'm taking even more from my mister bottle, and then I'm spraying it on there, and that's going to cause some actual drips in my paint, so it looks like it's a piece of plaster that has just worn over time, and the paint finish is just failing and it's coming off. So I had a little more of the Driftwood on there than what I wanted, so I just took a rag and just sort of dabbed at it. So this won't take a whole lot off as long as I'm not rubbing, I'm just dabbing. It's just going to take it off of the peaks. And then I just continue this through even to my little bunny scene, but you'll see on this part I'm actually using a little bit less because I'm wanting my bunnies to be highlighted, so I'm trying to make sure that this color variation is just a smidge different than the rest of it. So to get even more color variation, I'm going to use Paint Couture in the color Carbon, and I'm just going to take this and put it around the outside of my molds that I'm wanting to highlight. So the way that I'm using the paint right here is I'm using it sort of as a glaze. So you'll see me spritz some water on here and then put it in there, really work it in the details, and then I'm going to take a rag and then dab off the excess off of it. This is going to give it sort of a dirty, grungy sort of effect, but it's also going to highlight those raised areas. And then you'll see that I'm just taking what's left on my paintbrush, and then I'm just sort of taking it toward at the top and then just dragging it down. I'm sort of making like a little vignette around where my bunnies are. Now I'm going to take more of that carbon, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing around the molds on the back side of the egg. I just put it on, I'll spray some water, I'll dab off any of the excess of it, I'll try to get some drips and some runs so that it sort of looks like it's been sitting out in the rain and the weather and it's just deteriorating. The main thing that I'm wanting to do here is I'm wanting to really showcase those molds. I'm wanting to show the difference in the high points and the low points. So whenever a piece of ceramic or plaster or even cement is out, like in a garden, you'll see that it doesn't wear the same way all over the whole piece. So the peaks and the valleys are going to wear off differently depending, you know, on what it's exposed to. There's going to be some sides of it that the sun's going to be hitting more, so those are going to age differently. So what I'm trying to do here is I want to mimic that wornness, like it's really been outside in the elements. So now I'm going to take that same carbon and I'm just going to sort of rub it across the top of my texture. I just want it to hit some of the high points and settle in some of the low points. So you can see a couple different colors that I'm using here on my bunnies, but I just want to note that I'm not using a lot of the color on here. I'm actually using this more of as like a watercolor. So I'm putting a lot of water and not a lot of paint. And I'm just barely putting it on here just to sort of tint my rabbits. I don't want them to have vibrant colors because I want this to look like it is a piece of worn concrete that's been sitting in a garden forever. Now I just take some Paint Couture Extreme Guard and I use the color Flat in this. There are a couple different sheens that you could use, but I just thought that the flat would look nice since I'm sort of trying to replicate a concrete ball. Now, one thing that you want to be mindful of whenever you're doing something that's this textured is you may get some bubbling in your top coat whenever you're putting it on there, and you just want to make sure that you smooth that out a little bit. So after I got my top coat on, I got some Stardust out. This is also from Paint Couture Paint, and I'm just dabbing it on everything. Now, where I have my top coat on there, I can put this Stardust on and it will be very easy for me to wipe it back, so I can leave as much or as little on there as I want. Now you'll see that I'm concentrating it on the inside of the frame of where my bunnies are, and then also on the raised molds that are going across where the seam is on the back. Once that I got done with that, I felt like the high points were kind of just blending into the background. So I got some more of that buttercream and I just sort of dry brushed it across the top of my molds. So whenever you're dry brushing, you're wanting to use very minimal product and you're just wanting to drag it across the top of the high points. And then I'm also taking some of the buttercream and I'm just putting it along the back part of where the main mold is right there. And I just wanted it to sort of highlight it a little bit more so that it really draws your eyes in and brings it into where those bunnies are. Now you'll notice that I didn't sand whenever I very first added my texture on, and that's because I wanted there to be a little more of a tonal variation, so I wanted to wait until the end to do it. So I just used a light hand and I just sanded that down. Now I'm taking Paint Couture in the color Driftwood, and this is actually a little candle holder that I got from Hobby Lobby whenever it was on the 75% off after the spring sale last year. So I'm just taking that color Driftwood and I'm just putting it on and then wiping it off, and I'm using a little bit of water beforehand to kind of help thin that down so that it's not so stark once that it's on the wood. Now where that candle holder had that little emblem on the front of it, I used a little piece of this molding. Now I'm not sure if this one was iFlex or this one was Wood You Bend. This is just a piece that I had in my stash. I just took it and I heated it up so that it could conform to the front of that shape a little bit better. And then I took a hot glue gun and I just glued it on there. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to glue this base and the egg together. So I have a strong super glue and that's what I'm wanting to use to adhere it, but I just use a little bit of hot glue to get it to set immediately. And then I just lightly add a little bit of that Stardust to the emblem and the piece is done. And we're done! Look how cute it turned out. It looks like it has been sitting in a garden for years and years and years, and I just absolutely love this and I can't wait to use it in my home. I had plans to sell it, but I love it so much I really think that I'm just going to keep this sucker. So guys, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe.